Okay, now as we record, I wanted to repeat that really quick so the other students know they can come the next time. Yeah, to get good letters of recommendation, it's kind of tough in an online venue. So you kind of want to ask yourself, how do I stand out? How do I do well, etc. And, you know, by being part of like a Zoom meeting, I can always write that in a letter of recommendation, stuff like that. You don't have to show yourself if you don't want to. That doesn't affect anything that I'm saying because I respect, you know, anonymity and stuff like that. So without further ado, questions first about the midterm, and then you can ask any question you would like. So does anyone have a first question? Nothing? Oh, I like it. We can go home early. Look at that. Not one. All right. Who's got a question? No one's got a question. Any question? So you people already know what to do on the exam.
I have a question about careers and that sort of thing.
We're going to wait to that right after this, though. But yeah, that definitely will be cool. Anyone have a question? Anyone? I got the thing right in front of me. No questions. Let's take a look. No chat, no question, no anything.
How many questions will the test be?
All right, good question, Ken. So we'll just begin like that. Okay, so we got about 16 points here. They're worth 1 point each. So to begin with, you want to know about Hans Morgenthau, national security and power. I'm big on that. That's why I mentioned Vietnam, if you were listening, Nicaragua and other places, is that power is ambiguous. How is it that the United States, seeing things from a United States perspective, that the United States was able to take Japan and Germany and major powers, but lost Vietnam, Nicaragua, and a whole host of other smaller wars? We see it in Iraq, Afghanistan, etc. Power is very ambiguous. That consists of a lot of different factors, right? So when we get into counterinsurgency, you know, is the United States or another country able to get into stop these insurgencies? Another thing is, who remembers what counterinsurgency and beyond about that article? That reflected a particular idea or theory related to how countries need to do an approach towards national security. Does anyone remember what it reflected?
It reflected the purists and the fusionists.
Right. It was about that debate. In my argument, and since I'm the professor, it would be more towards the fusionist, because what it did was it was focusing on the idea that these people from Missouri, but that's awesome. You remember it, were agricultural specialists. So you're not just going in there like we see Russia and the Ukraine. And I really enjoyed those debates, by the way. A lot of people took the no side. We shouldn't continue supporting them. And then a few took the we have to. But, you know, you need to go in to win the hearts and mind. And then you have to train the military in a different way. And a lot of people, a lot of soldiers I've had in the in-class, particularly of national security, U.S. foreign policy, have stressed that that seems to be the way that it's going. So you want to get other people involved. Good. Does anyone remember the article on Pompeo and Bolton? And that's playing out right now in the Republican. What did that reflect?
Basically, these major powers within the government become more interested in fighting each other than they do like the actual common good.
Yeah, common good. That's a good point. Yeah, 100%. So it's all about bureaucratic infighting. So when we study the national security of a state, it doesn't have to be the United States. That's just the example. You have to look at the bureaucratic players and who wins. So if you look at the recent, maybe I'll put this on the exam, with the Wagner fight against Putin, Putin won that hands down. Now, you have to say to yourself, this is a little different than the bureaucratic fighting you'd see in the United States, but it was kind of a battle for power, and Putin won. These are the things we look at in national security, because then you can understand where the state's going in a certain way. So the fact that Pompeo beat Bolton means that Pompeo had Trump's ear. And it works like that in a lot of bureaucracies. You can see, for example, Putin has fired a number of military men. Why? And then you can study the military men with whom he basically speaks to. They have his ear, etc. So that's a way to look at foreign policy. Very good. That's good stuff. Now, the one on Myanmar, I want to do this stuff. That's about everything. That's a lamentable video, documentary that basically takes national security from not a U.S. perspective, but a more local perspective there, that has all of the elements: state actors, non-state actors, neighboring states. So one of the problems with the Myanmar crisis is you're getting an influx. Does anyone remember where all those the Rohingya people, if I'm pronouncing that right, where they're going? They're going to one of the most populous countries in the world.
Bangladesh.
Right, Bangladesh. So this is one of the things people have to think when they do national security. This isn't just pure U.S. foreign policy, but more like seeing it from states' perspectives, different non-state perspectives. Like the Rohingya are human beings, so they have their own security interests, obviously not getting killed by the military junta in Myanmar. But then Bangladesh then all of a sudden has this interest because they're a massively populated country. Can they handle more people? And that's one of the things that national security specialists study, right? If particularly if you're interested in an area. Also, there's definitely a question about the Cuban Missile Crisis and Estonia, and now the Ukraine. What makes these things like kind of interesting? What was that about? Remember the little video and all the stuff, the videos on that? I mean, the lecture and then the video. It's a perennial concept in national security studies, and it's panning out right now in the Ukraine. It's
So
absolutely
the balancing of powers.
100%. You look at it, Cuba said, look at the United States is encroaching on us. It's trying to invade us. We're bringing in the Soviet Union. Estonia said, look at Russia, wants to invade us probably someday. We're bringing in NATO. Now Ukraine says the only way we're going to be able to handle the Russian invasion, bring in NATO and the United States. This is classic balance of power. And it goes on continuously, regardless, which is important for this question, culture, language, time, etc. That's why we have unions, whether you're pro-union or anti-union. I'm talking about like within the United States. I mean, you see all these people, out there protesting. A lot of people say, oh, they're such socialists or whatever. No, I see it as a balance of power. Look at, you have your interests, we have our interests. The only way we can stop you from basically exploiting us is that if we group together and balance you. Age-old things. And that's one of the things I really enjoyed the debates on the Ukraine. I think a lot of people in the United States are getting, like, well, we have problems at home with spending too much money. Very interesting debate. They've been sending State Department people. They came to my class. He was a little hacky to support Joe Biden's support of the Ukraine to the students, but the students didn't really, they kind of, debated back. It was really good. But the United States is having a tough time in Ukraine. It's keeping, will the Ukraine be able to keep the United States balancing Russia in that area? I mean, it's going to be in the long haul. I'd love to hear your opinions, but we don't have too much time now, but I love those debates. Now, looking at foreign policy in a different way, log rolling and Plan Colombia. See, I wrote that. And, if a professor writes the article, you got to know it, because no one's going to read our stuff unless we force you to do it. And we're very egotistical. We didn't get enough love as children, so now we need your attention. So what was that article in one word, if you had to do it, or a couple? What would that be? What are we focusing on here for? Plan Colombia, log rolling. National security isn't just about defense, the common good. It's also about what?
Lobbying, bribing.
Money. We love money, right? Look there was a very good article. Did I give it in this class? It was on how much money like the arms dealers are making from the Ukraine crisis. Now, whether you support the Ukraine or not, you can't ignore the fact that people are making money from it, right? those people are going to be lobbying the Biden administration and other administrations like in NATO and stuff like that to keep, obviously supporting the Ukraine. Money is always an issue. We love money. We'd kill our own parents for money. Many people do, actually, the Melendez brothers, all that stuff. But we love money. So that's important to understand in national security. One of the reasons why I think Erdogan is so popular, was because of the earthquake, not in Turkey, was he actually created a drone program. Well, not him, but he kind of really funded it, that really incorporated a lot of people and a lot of lobbyists and a lot of people in Ukraine, in Turkey. They actually was selling them both to the Ukraine, Iran, Russia, etc. Turkey is not a dumb country. They really play all the sides together. Now, the current crisis in the Persian Gulf, the context of hybrid warfare, this has everything. I love this article because it has non-state actors, state actors, and cyber warfare. It's very, very interesting article. That's really what I focus on in the question. If you didn't get a chance to read it, hybrid warfare, I think, is extremely important. And it also has the non-state actors, the people a lot of states hire in order to fight their wars. We call them private military contracts here. Russia has been using, obviously, the Wagner Group. It's been really, this is like this compound warfare where you're actually using a lot of non-state, non-governmental actors in your war and hiring them in order to do your fighting. And Gaddafi used them. So many people use them because then you can kind of go around all the Geneva conventions and all that stuff in order to battle. That's very, very important. I really like it. It takes a different focus because I'm trying to encompass all the regions of the world. That's more Middle East, Lebanon, etc. So that had everything, cyber warfare. And I think that's important because as someone mentioned, what about the careers in, say, national security? In the United States spends a lot of money on national security. There's a lot of opportunities in cybersecurity, etc. Thinking if there was a great guy who used to work at ASU and he spoke Russian fluently. His wife was from the Ukraine. And, when this conflict blew up, I said, hey, bring him to my class. And he's like, he no longer works here. He works for cybersecurity because, he's making more money because of the crisis. There's a lot of space in which we can talk about after in national security in the United States. And that's basically compound warfare, right? The use of irregular forces, like in the Russian and Ukraine conflict, the Wagner Group, right? That is what compound warfare is. That's a different type of warfare. So we had, state, non-state, cyber, and then compound warfare within that article. And the Wagner Group, they use Hezbollah as an example. You can correct me if I'm wrong in that article, but it's really cool, that article, because it really reflects how Russia was using Wagner Group. And now without the Wagner Group, some were incorporated into the Russian government, but what is going to go on now? Very interesting. So what is I was in Colombia and I filmed the Colombian peace process. This is going to be very, very important for every conflict. What was that about in a nutshell, the Colombian peace process? Who remembers?
Incorporating ex-combatants back into society.
Right. This is huge task. I mean, this is why we have the GI Bill. All these things is like, we don't want ex-soldiers in the street. It's more difficult for developing countries. This is going to be a big thing actually after. Will I be alive by the time the Ukraine-Russian war ends? Probably not. But anyway, so what's going to happen to all these ex-combatants? What's going to happen to all these people who essentially, fighting, and then after, what happens to them, right? And not only that, what happens to all the people who are kind of caught up in that terrorism? Exactly. That's exactly correct. And then there's a couple more. Oh, asymmetrical terrorism. What's that about?
Sort of different levels of, asymmetrical. So you don't have like conventional versus conventional. You'll have like terrorist organization versus the United States. That's asymmetrical terrorism.
Exactly. And they're using these innovative tactics. That's exactly what the urban warfare was when you saw the two on the ground lectures. That's what I call them in Colombia, where they kind of blew up a mall. And then, but it was even worse that Nogales nightclub, although someone said it wasn't a nightclub, but they use it at night as a nightclub for the rich. They got really nailed in that. So, if you can't take a power, right, power goes underground. So they start fighting in a different way. It's like if you've ever seen, I'll put this on the exam. I got to write it down. The Patriot. Who's seen that movie with Mel Gibson?
Love that movie.
Do you really? Good. Then I'll definitely put it on. What it is he says to his sons or whoever's fighting, he says, look at these people, don't even know this land. You know the land, use the land. He basically was saying, be terrorists. So the United States of America, are we a terrorist government? Were we built on terrorism? Damn right. We tarred and feather those bastards. I mean, that's a pretty cruel way to die, right? So, that was it. You don't fight them one-on-one, fight them, in a way that's more like these asymmetrical tactics, hit and run, scare them, etc. Because you're never going to win them one-on-one. Very good. And that's a question about the Ukraine. Even if Russia won, would Russia, having this huge swath of land, be dealing with these asymmetrical attacks, forever? Is it worth even having the Ukraine? Right. And as someone's brought up a while ago, one of my students, they said, hey, man, the Ukraine is now devastated. Do you even want this area? This is one of the things. So holding on to land that's not yours is very costly. This is the Chechen War. Well, I'll put this on the exam. The Chechen soldiers, the separatists, were killed, and then their wives took these terrorist attacks against Russia. And basically, Russia had to deal with these, they're called the Black Widows. They were an asymmetrical attacks by these women, and people sometimes don't think of women, engaging in this against the Russian government. But it finally kind of clamped down, but there were 4 Chechen wars. So that's very, very important. So outside the keyword list, we'll definitely put on something on the Chechen, the Black Widows, because I think that's important, particularly to this crisis, because people forget Russia fought a crisis in the Chechnya area for the longest time, and it never stopped. So, is it different from the Ukraine? Ukraine's a separate country. Race always plays a thing. So like Chechens were Muslims. These people are white, blue eyes. I mean, people are racist. So they say, oh, you're killing our own people, where the Chechens weren't. All of these variables kind of play in. But the Chechen women who became the Black Widows used asymmetrical attacks. Ooh, awesome question. So that and the Patriot, definitely. The Patriot's a good one because it's a movie, but it also shows you how to be, quote unquote, a terrorist. And then Dora Maria Tellez, that one is about intersubjective terrorism. And that's another thing that kind of goes into that. It's basically one person's freedom fighter is another person's terrorist, right? So Great Britain wasn't sitting around saying, oh, we love Ben Franklin and George Washington and all these other people. They were calling them bandits and other names. So, you got to consider that. That's very interesting, because sometimes we say, oh, we're going to root out the terrorists, but are they terrorists or freedom fighters? And that got us kind of bogged down in Vietnam, because we were saying we were fighting with the good people, but were we? I mean, that becomes the question. I mean, I know after they kind of brutalized a lot of people. So that is the Viet Cong. So we don't know. And then finally, what I see is Ukraine, Mersheimer. How many people hate Mersheimer? A lot of my students hate him because he actually attributes partly the conflict in the Ukraine to the United States expanding or pushing to expand NATO to Russia's borders. Is this true or not? That's for you people to debate, but I mention it. You can read articles on it. He's one of the big supporters that we were going into Russia's sphere of influence, and Russia's actually acting like a rational actor because it doesn't want the United States on its soil. Pretty interesting argument, but do you agree or not? But you have to take it into account. A lot of people hate Mearsheimer. So that's about it for the quiz, the midterm. There's a lot of information on there. And I probably will say, the Andean bomb and the Nogal, that's part of, asymmetrical warfare. You don't know who did it to this day. It's all hiding, denial, all those things I talked about in the lecture that you probably know. You never know who is the quote unquote terrorist or freedom fighter or whatever, because who you're fighting against, right, are your own people, usually within your country. And they could be a student. And when I lived in Nicaragua, it was interesting. A lot of these people did these acts. And I had Salvadoran people from a guerrilla group called the FMLN. They said, but in the day they would go to school because they were older then. And then at night they'd go blow something up. It's kind of interesting how these things go. And will Russia be dealing with these people, even if it was able to take over the Ukraine? How many people think Russia will end up taking over all of the Ukraine? Anyone here think so? No? How many people think Russia will get pulled out, or it'll just keep a small area of the Ukraine?
I mean, I think they're definitely going to hold the areas that are pro-Russian.
Yeah, Donbass and all that area. Interesting. I had a girl in this class and a few others. She was now she's being investigated by the FBI. I just wrote her a recommendation too for being a Russian bot, for being a pro-Russian. I don't want to say the word spy, but communicating Russian information and everything else. She was a great student, but she was always taking kind of not completely Russia's side, but giving us a different thing on Russia. It was pretty interesting. The FBI was completely, all you got to do is Google FBI investigates ASU students. And she took me for like 4 or 5 classes. I always think in these classes, I have some spies because, I have so many people and all this stuff. All right. And if that's it for the midterm, what other questions do you have about the class? Anything, complaints? Well, don't do that now because I'm sure you got plenty. Any questions? Final paper, internship? Nothing? Wow, this was a big one.
If nobody else will, I'll give my career question a shot.
Sure, no problem. And if you people don't want to stay, you have stuff to do, because I do understand online people, students have a lot to do, as I see there in one of the photos that says Tara, you have pictures of kids, and then other people. It is. I respect the online students a lot. I know you have a lot going on. That's why you'll have a lot of extra points. People keep on asking me, oh man, I can't do this right. I was hospitalized. Don't worry. There's a lot of extra points here. There's like a good 15 extra points. I mean, that's like you could literally fail, all the quizzes and still get an A. So I do respect you. So if time is of an essence and you have to go, that's perfectly fine. And I will be posting this as well. But any questions you people have is great. Go ahead, Josh.
So if we're like really into this whole national security stuff, and what other, so 2 parts to this question. First, what other classes would you recommend we take? I just took a American military history class. That was a good one.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Was that in the history department?
Yeah, I was in the history department. Yeah.
Yeah, sadly, Von Hagen passed away from cancer. He was a World War II expert, and he was from Columbia. Amazing class, but I'm sure that class was amazing as well.
Yeah, and actually I'm taking there's a diplomacy class. That one looks good. So I'm signed up for that for the fall.
Awesome.
Yeah, but other than that, if we're interested like in getting into sort of intelligence, like as an analyst or something like that, do you have any recommendations as far as?
Well, first, I mean, it really depends. I was solicited by the CIA when I got back from Nicaragua, only because I lived in Nicaragua so long. They were like really interested in it. No one knows much about it, Nicaragua. Now it's huge because of Orteguismo, what's going on there. And they had a revolution and all this stuff. So it's always kind of been in the CIA's radar. So they were very interested in those on the ground cultural skills. I speak Spanish like them and stuff like that. Time abroad can help you, but if you spend too much time abroad, it might hurt you. There's a lot of different skills. I teach a political statistics, not online, but in class, and they do like those types of analysts. There's GIS. There's certain skills, technological skills they like. We have actually a course in, we have a master's and they do something on cyber warfare. There's the Foreign Service. You could take an exam. That's a good one. The CIA is tough for the reason that it's so competitive. So you have to have a strong competitive advantage. There was a student I know, he did Southeast Asian studies. He's amazing, etc. He got to fly out to the CIA. He went through everything. They asked these really tough questions like, do you watch porn? How much money have you stolen from the internet by watching free movies? Just watching, not selling. All this stuff. And for whatever reason, he comes back and he just gets a letter, very short. You didn't get the job. They don't tell you. Then he went back and then he didn't get it again. It's a tough gig, like anything else. Because the CIA, the benefits too, but being a political analyst, my advice is have a comparative advantage, whatever that is. It could be a language, it could be an area, it could be, hey, you're a special in Africa. You don't have to study a foreign language necessarily. You're just like an expert in China, in Latin America, and then you want to start building up a portfolio on that. Anything is a comparative advantage. It can be technological skills, GIS, heavy quantitative research, qualitative research. They do like language skills. There's a broad range. And if the CIA is, remember, they have intelligence agencies everywhere in the US government. They have intelligence in the State Department, even in like the Secretary of the Treasury Department there. Everywhere has intelligence. Also, there are other routes. The Foreign Service is often a good one. And usajobs.com or .org. I should send it out. In fact, I will. I didn't release it yet. I have on the board. You have to publish things so you can see them. A thing like careers in national security and then some links and stuff. And they always have stuff in there. One of the difficult things, a lot of times they're like for people, say, for example, intelligence in the Air Force for people in the Air Force, but there is a lot of space out there. Cyber warfare is huge. There's such a broad range. So you got to start thinking, what's my comparative advantage? What can I do? If you're a really good test taker, the Foreign Service is kind of cool. That's more the State Department. But the diplomacy class has real diplomats teaching it. So that'll be good as well. So they'll have really good on the ground experience. And it's getting competitive. I hate to say it, but master degrees do help. There's this guy, he's going to Georgetown. He wants to get in national security. Another guy, he's going to do an online at American University. And I guess they do have good connections. Washington, D.C. is always a good connected place, but it depends on what you're looking for. And what you can do too, if you're married, if you're this, if you're that, you have, there are sometimes constraints with that, but there's a lot of space. Just go to usajobs.com or .org. Actually, I'll publish it tonight. That module. There's a lot out there. And also there's also private businesses that use intelligence, even things you don't think about, like supply chain. Right? People say supply chain. Why would a supply chain company in Scottsdale want someone like you interested in geopolitics? Supply chain is all about geopolitics, as we saw with the COVID, other things, right? So let's say there's a bunch of protests. I was there in Nicaragua. They cut off the whole country. What happens to the chicken coming from Costa Rica? The poor chicken. What happens to the chicken? It's on a truck. So it's like you can't get through. So they're really interested in a lot of people who know geopolitics for a lot of businesses, which you wouldn't think of. And when the girl, she did an internship, she was like you, like a national security student, U.S. foreign policy of mine. And then they hired her full time because they really liked her. She was a political analyst for like a supply chain company. You figure you'd need a supply chain degree to get a job there, but no, they need people who know this stuff. Pretty interesting. Anything else? Follow up.
Can I just
Yeah.
follow up? The one thing about, I did look into the private intelligence jobs. There's a lot of them.
Yeah.
But the one problem I noticed is they seem, at least from the surface, want you to already have a security clearance. It seems like they want you to come out of the military or intel agencies, you know?
Yeah.
Do you think is that correct or incorrect? Do you know?
I don't know. I mean, you'd have to talk to the company, but they might say that, but their real intention are tax benefits. A lot of private companies get tax benefits for hiring veterans, which is good. I mean, because, you know, we don't want veterans, you know, like after World War I. So there might be a little economic advantage to that as well. But I wouldn't let it discourage you. I'd still apply. And applying is difficult because you want to tailor your cover letter, your resume and stuff like that. But I would have one for, like, say, a resume, cover letter, etc., for private, and then one for government, etc., and try, because it does get kind of time consuming, you know, looking at all those jobs. And now it's so competitive, isn't it? If you've been looking at them, it's like, you know, oh man, you know, this is a lot. And they say experience, but I don't know you personally, Josh, but don't marginalize experience that doesn't seem to be in the intelligence realm. Like if you've been a manager or something, but they like these kinds of experiences, right? Your ability to get along with people, you know, your ability to deal with conflict. Even like this, people, you know, sometimes say, well, I was just a bartender. How many times have you dealt with conflict? I know it sounds like kind of silly, but, you know, you can really see a lot of jobs we have really do build skill that, you know, you can use in an interview. So, you know, you want to think about how you can kind of milk all of your life with this stuff. Anything else, Jenna?
I have a really quick follow-up. It's kind of personal on the like having a competitive advantage for like job applications. So I kind of focused in on like anti-trafficking type issues at the end of high school and start of college. I've kind of fallen away from that, but then recently went to North Macedonia and I'm applying for like a virtual internship at the embassy there.
Awesome.
But I'm wondering, like, do you have a perspective on like, or like, is it better to be like, is there one I should maybe focus on more? I'm probably gonna like continue to learn on both of them, but like, is it better to have an area or an issue or
That's a good question. And I always say area and issue, but do you need like both? It really depends on the job. So you did Henry Sivak's and Keith Brown's thing in Macedonia?
Yeah, it was really
That's
awesome.
awesome. Keith is well known in the State Department. He's actually, Henry's great. I'm not trying to marginalize Henry, but Keith this is another thing about recommendations. Keith is actually really big with that institute there, the critical languages and all that stuff. If you were able to get a recommendation from him, that is very, very helpful. Henry too will write a good one, but I think Keith is a little more like in the power structures, if you will. And Henry would admit that as well. You know, those things count as well. So, and the fact that you went abroad, they like that. You did that, you know, really milk that for what it's worth. The trafficking is an amazing subject. A lot of people are interested in it. You know, you want to kind of tailor your experiences to these different things. So if you're really interested in, say there's one on trafficking, you focus on that. But let's say there's intelligence and, you know, in Eastern Europe, then you focus on, oh, I was in Macedonia. That's one of the big CIA outlets too, you know, and I did this, blah, blah, blah. So it really depends. You can milk. And I don't say that in a negative way, by the way, maybe emphasize depending on the job. So the fact that you are really into human trafficking, you know, will help you in that area. But then if you go in another area, you can also talk about that, but then you can kind of deviate a little and talk about your experience in Eastern Europe, which is pretty amazing. Not many people, study Eastern Europe.
Yeah, it was a really fun experience. I was grateful to get to go.
Yeah, that's great. The
I-
problem is those things are expensive sometimes.
No, it was pricey. I'll be paying it off for like a little bit, but it's
Oh,
okay.
well, yeah, don't worry.
Great.
Anything else? Nothing? So if there's nothing else, I'll stop here. I want to appreciate everyone coming out. Anything, Brandon? You didn't mention anything? If you got nothing, you got nothing, but I appreciate you coming. Some people just like to listen and stuff and they actually don't. John, Miriam, anyone? Ken? Well,
I
oh,
do
go
have
ahead.
one piece of advice because I have a little bit of knowledge on the agency. So because the CIA gets so many applications, one trick is they actually do have recruiters around the United States, and they do have information sessions as well. The trick
At
is
ASU.
they do. They have what, recruiter at ASU?
Yeah. They
Oh,
come
interesting.
during these jobs. I don't know post-COVID. Sorry, though. Go ahead.
So the trick is you got to get your application flagged by the recruiter. So if they flag it, then you will get looked at. And that's how you get out of the stack. So yeah.
What does flag entail?
Well, okay, I went to a class. I'll give you an example. I went to a class, and it was an intelligence class. It was put on by like an FBI related organization. Okay, it was like an Intel 101 class. The guy who was teaching, who introduced the class, used to run the farm for the CIA,
wow.
and was chief of station in like Africa and for a few African countries, and I think over the whole Africa. So a pretty important guy. He was looked at by Biden. He was one of the guys who was looked at by Biden to be his CIA head. So I approached him, during the break, and I said, "Hey, talk to him." And so he told me that even though he's not official, he still does work for the agency, even though he's retired. He still does help them with recruiting, and so a guy like that can flag an application for you. Similarly, like I went to an info session where they had like an CIA and FBI info session, and there are guys there who are recruiters from the CIA and the FBI, and the CIA guys, they'll give you like an email address, and they will help you with your resume or help you with your like different, like they'll look it over and help you with it. So they can also flag the application. So my understanding is the way I look at it is like you apply to Harvard, you're in a stack of, 1,000. How do you get like seriously looked at and not just blown by as just another one? You get one of those people to go in and flag it. So.
I guess that's the legacy thing. There's actually a court case on that. Thanks so much, Josh, for that information. That's interesting. Yeah, I've seen them before COVID. They were pretty ubiquitous presence on ASU campus and the job fairs and everything else. So that's interesting. So anything else? Because we can all take off and have a nice Wednesday. Today's Waffle Wednesday. If you like the what's it called? The Impossible. You don't like that? It's like not real meat, but it's like it's good. I don't know. They pay me $1,000 to say that. No, I'm kidding. They don't pay me anything. But anyways, oh, by the way, I'm not with the KGB. This is from Sub in Cartagena, Colombia. It's actually a bar. So I thought it was really cool. It's all Russian. It was by a Russian who set it up. Like not, this was a long time ago before the Ukraine crisis. So I was like drinking a beer there. Too expensive though. So I don't want you to think I'm doing propaganda for all these, for Putin. Although I would if he paid me enough money. So if there's no more questions, I want to thank everyone for coming out, and I'm going to post it, and that's it. So everyone have a great, and any questions, just hit me in the community forum. And I do try to get back quickly with the emails. So take care, everyone.
Thank you so much.
Take care.
Have a good one.
Thank you.